Hi, everyone. Welcome back. If you've been joining us for the past two panels, this is the third panel of the day. Welcome. This panel is called Roots of Resilience, the Legacy and Future of Black Cooperativism. My name is Joy Edwards. I'm the moderator of this panel and the manager of knowledge and policy at Common Future. I'm deeply passionate about human flourishing, so I'm grateful to be in community with you all today. I'm going to go ahead and welcome in our panelists. Welcome, Elizabeth and Tama. So I'm so excited to be here with you both today and talk about the legacy and future of Black cooperativism. When I think about the legacy of Black cooperativism, I'm reminded of Gwendolyn Brooks, who says that we are each other's harvest, we are each other's business, we are each other's magnitude and bond. So over the next 40 minutes, we're going to explore the origins of cooperativism, its evolution, and its current form. To get us started, can each of you please give us a quick intro of yourself, what you do for your cooperative, what it is, and what it does? Elizabeth, why don't you go first?
You can hear me? That's a yes. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Carter. I am an attorney, a community planner, inclusive redeveloper, and cooperator. I primarily practice law where I provide counsel, strategy, and compliance to other conscious redevelopers, real estate companies, real estate investment funds, in the areas commercial real estate, public finance, and private capital. But I'm also the founding member or co-founding member of Woods Connect Holding Cooperative, which I'll be talking more about today. Woods Connect Holding Cooperative is a worker-owned, Black women-led holding cooperative that supports Black women entrepreneurs or self-employed Black women workers who are interested in scaling and growing their businesses through a membership-owned business ecosystem where we provide funding and other professional support services such as legal, accounting, marketing, and admin related services, as well as providing affordable commercial space and access to real estate investment and global trading opportunities. And I'm looking forward to, really discussing more about what we do and sort of our origin and our why. Thank you for having me.
And greetings, everyone. I am Tama Yisrael, and I serve as the Education and Outreach Coordinator of Cooperation New Orleans. New Orleans, like many other cities across the country, has supported an economy that extracts and harms people who work to generate that economy. And really, what becomes excess wealth for capitalists while we struggle to meet our needs. So, Cooperation New Orleans is really a movement working together to create programs, resources, and really start conversations about how cooperatives can put power back into the hands of the people. We include cooperators, artists, organizers, educators, family members, workers, and just residents of the city of New Orleans who really have the same desire for a more cooperative economy. In this movement space, we have organized ourselves as a steering committee where we go after resources necessary to manifest this work. We're able to achieve this through working groups, generating loans for cooperatives created by Black and Indigenous people. We also create educational platforms like the Black Liberation Co-op Academy, through art interventions curated by a project we have called Cooperation Gumbo, and doing local convenings and gatherings where we foster this conversation.
Thank you both. And we couldn't be joined today by Tama's business partner, but we send her our well wishes. So we know that cooperative economics is nothing new. As you both mentioned, it's kind of an indigenous technology. It's been used as a means for survival for Black communities for a really long time. And as we say, forced to make a way out of no way. As communities have struggled to survive, they have begun to adopt these models and then advance community care. So we know that it's that resiliency movement framework, and it's also a legal entity. Can you both speak to more on the legacy of cooperativism in Black communities and how it's also fostered economic sustainability for the long term?
Yeah, I'll hop in there. I like how you framed this, Joy, and I'm really excited about the question because when I think about this, most of our communities lean into cooperative economics and practices as an embodiment of resistance to systemic oppression. It's really a mechanism, like you lifted out, to meet our needs when there aren't any other resources. We lean on each other, we lean on the spirit of we have to work together to be in support of each other. So, all throughout history, you see that as like the context, even as early, well, as late as during the civil rights era, and even prior, when we look at the Underground Railroad, this resistance to our bodies and our labor being taken for capital gain, and really the work of colonizing our what we call economy. When you look at what the economy exactly is, it is really a system to manage our own households. And so someone has flipped that idea on top of us. And so we've used cooperatives as a way of really regaining power through mutual aid practices here in the United States, to susus and other mechanisms in other indigenous places around our diaspora. Cooperative economics served as that tool, not just as a legal entity, but as a really a divine system for us to curate needs being met. Now, as a legal entity, we've seen the European way of that being a mechanism now, and there are more resources available under that idea. And I'm really looking to how we can change the landscape on that today and take some of the European-esque energy out of it and really restore some of those historical contexts like Ubuntu into our practice of cooperation.
Thank you for speaking to that truth behind the extremities of this body politic to which we are all subjected and its connection to our bodies. Elizabeth?
I don't really have much to add. I agree with everything Tamai said. I would say that historically, I guess I would add historically, Black cooperatives, as you mentioned, were structured in a myriad of ways. Some formal, others informal. But I believe that nonetheless, however they were structured, whether it's formal, informal, or in any which way, the overarching goal was always to build thriving communities, because we were marginalized, or still is. We are a marginalized community, and so the idea is like, how do we build an alternative to the broader mainstream system that is more responsive and respective and dignifying for us? I think today that still is the goal, because again, collectively we still are a marginalized group, whether it's from the traditional funding sources, traditional housing, et cetera, et cetera. We see these inequities that we often face, and so today I believe Black co-ops and other southern economies are working towards a new system. But the unfortunate side is that as co-ops are sort of being, including Black co-ops, are being adopted into the mainstream, what we have seen is that there's this tendency for Black co-ops to operate under more of a white liberal ideology, which seems to dominate and dictate the form, structure, and even the substance of the co-op. So what I mean by that is, there's a lot of movement around creating different legal structures, formal legal structures. But the question is, who is actually behind that policy work and what is their lived experience? Because what that matters, because what is written in that particular statute or that policy, what can constrain and often do constrain some of the creativity and innovativeness of Black co-ops, which is necessary for transforming, right, these systems. It's necessary for promoting effective and change and achieving liberation and self-determination. And so, it's important that we keep that in mind, that as we're gaining more resources or getting more support, especially from allies, that we still maintain that foundation and allow co-ops to work for us and not us working for co-ops. So that's what I would say. I think that historically has always been a tool for liberation, and if what we need to do is work hard to maintain co-ops as a tool for liberation for the Black community.
Yes. So to that end, so we talked a little bit about how they're different from their past cooperative models and how they've evolved a bit here and there. Can you both speak to what's needed for the cooperative models and economics in Black communities specifically to thrive and then grow, as you said, prosper? Whoever wants to start.
I'll jump in. And name that in recent times, the legal entity manifested itself and brought forth, different tax benefits, different ways that you can curate and generate capital to start your business. There are now entities that are dedicated to supporting cooperatives and providing funding. As you can see right now, there's a lot of uh, I want to say urban cooperative development spaces. And I think what we're missing in a lot of spaces is more people that are really connected to the way the Black economy was cultivated in the first place. And so while we have a way of being in our communities, um, that way of being doesn't necessarily fit into the box and has never fit into the box that, we've been colonized to actually be a part of. And so, one of the things I think we should really go towards is understanding the history that we've been in, the history that we've had in cooperative practices, because we're not taught cooperatives as a business model, let alone a practice or a process. I also think that what is needed is more people who are knowledgeable about the cooperative model, even as a legal entity, to help us navigate the current infrastructure that we have to navigate. What does it look like to have a set of bylaws, a set of operating agreements that's in alignment with how we work together in our community, but also that are structured in a way that protects us from like the framework that we have to be in the current legal framework. So I think knowledge base, people who know how we work together and ways that we organize ourselves, and then just a connection to like we've been there, we've done this, and really remembering that this is a part of who we've been as a people.
Yeah, and I'll just add that within our co-op, the WisConnect Holding Cooperative, we always emphasize, or we try to start off with our why, and our why is stems from a business plus model. So yes, it's a holding cooperative which is composed of or composed of a number of businesses or have acquired a number of businesses underneath with the intent of doing great business, right? But we're not here to just do business. We're not just here to just create to make profit. We're here to make sure that the self-employed Black woman worker is sustained over time, not just herself, but her family and her communities. And with that in mind, we also make sure that we're not just thinking about this insular bubble of the co-op, but how are we engaging with the community surrounding us? How are we being part of the transformation of the broader community? Because as Tama mentioned, there is an ecosystem, it's a economy, a broad economy outside of that individual co-op that we have to tap into and we should be part of. And so I believe that in order to thrive and to sustain, that there has to be a critical analysis of the issues that the co-op is designed to resolve that goes beyond just making money or profit or doing business for its members, right? I think that's obviously the center and the core, but it's also like, okay, now what, right? Once we get to a place of sustainability internally, how do we make sure that our work is also have a concern for the community, that is also providing opportunities for the broader community to also thrive? How do we help create and form other co-ops so that youth entrepreneurs can thrive, or the elderly. And so I think it seems simple. It's like, oh, just provide capital and provide some legal support, which is all that is true. But I think that's the basic, that's the base, that's the surface. I think what we need to start thinking is a more of a transformational aspect to our work and our why and our community, and how does this co-op fit into the broader sort of scale of change that's desperately needed, because no matter what, we can try to thrive as much as possible in this existing system, but the existing system will always fall short. And there's a lot of limitations, especially as it concerns Black self-employed Black women workers. And so I think our job is to try to transform that system in order to make what we're doing the norm, right? I think that's the goal. So again, business plus, not just only a profit plus, is our model for sustainability, and then therefore thriving over time.
Thank you both for sharing. Yes, I was thinking about the internal power that cooperative models provide for our communities, and how, because it is collective power and our arms are linked together, one person's wellness is reliant on the other, as you stated, Tama, that Ubuntu kind of love and model. So yes, I love that. So I want to know, we know some amazing groups that are moving capital in this space. We talked about investing and getting that going and funneling that through, but what are the gaps that still exist specifically? And then the barriers to adoption and power building. We spoke a little bit to this, but is there anything that we missed that we want to uplift in this moment?
Ooh, this is exciting, because I think while we have really amazing groups that are like looking at a reparations base for giving capital, there's still a creative angle on how businesses are curated in most communities of color. Like we have the hustlers who don't necessarily fit into a certain business model. And how do we create space for those folks who really provide a necessary service in a lot of communities? And I'm not, promoting one way or the other, but I do think that there is space for more creative sources of revenue and funds that aren't necessarily based off business as usual. They may not have a business plan. They may not have an idea that looks attractive or doesn't look like a restaurant or your standard business model. There are business models that exist in communities that really actually help people build sustainability that you can't put on a 1, 2, 3 business plan. The other piece I think is missing is the idea that cooperatives are like a business. And what cities have done over the years is really create their city model, their city design, from how communities are laid out, from what resources are available, from the infrastructure, through how they attract businesses to cities. So in this case, cooperatives create a very unique opportunity for us to have collective ownership over how our communities are designed through attracting the businesses that we want. So as a people, if we're tired of like the failing infrastructure or things that are happening in our cities that aren't really meeting our needs, we can actually look at cooperative models as a way of like meeting those needs. One of the first like legal models of a cooperative in the United States was, I think, under the Rural Electric Cooperative Act. In places like New Orleans, how could we benefit from having an a cooperative that provides electricity when things happen? So it's a great opportunity for us to like reinvent, redesign our economy, and also redesign our neighborhoods if we see business as a way of doing that work.
Yeah, I'll piggyback what you said earlier, Tama, about just this understanding that so going back to the question about where are Black co-ops today and how we get back to sort of the historical roots. I think it's similar to this question, in that what I find in terms of the gaps in funding is that even within these spaces that are more aligned and more like understanding, obviously they support co-ops, there's still this box of which they put co-ops in. And so the co-op structure doesn't move with the needs of the people or the move or where people are going. And so then it becomes we're responding to co-ops, or we're responding to the structure versus the structure is responding to us. And so I found that to be true, even with, again, as you say, there's great, alternative funding sources, but it's often sometimes you have to do a little more work to kind of explain why, say, for instance, this worker co-op model, which we have, is not the typical worker co-op model because it's designed to also be a holding cooperative. And it's also led by Black women, self-employed workers. And a lot of those things, it depends on who you're speaking to, seems very complicated for some people. And so I found that you have to do, this is an ever evolving space. And so long as everyone is willing to kind of learn from one another, we should get to that goal of having these tools be responsive to us versus the other way around. But I have seen that depending on who's in leadership and what their sort of particular philosophy is around the model, that it can be limiting even within that space because of the sort of box that they put, that we often ourselves sometimes put what we think co-ops are. But I would say that would be probably one of the biggest gaps is we need to start thinking of co-ops or solidarity economies as a tool and not the end. We're really using these to get us to the community development, the liberation, and self-determination. And maybe 100 years from now, we're not even calling it co-ops, and that is okay, right? Because it's all about serving the people and what they want versus us just holding on to this model that may or may not serve us in the future. So that would be my 2-3 cents.
Yes, we talk a lot about visioning for the future, an economy of the future, communities of the future. What do we want? What really fills our cup? And I'm thinking now, too, I'm curious about the exciting or new things maybe you've seen in the co-op space. You talked a bit, both of you, about of course, the history of cooperative models, why they're necessary for a lot of Black communities, the power that they build for folks, and then what's needed to sustain and grow them. But what are some of the things that you've seen that, looking to the future, are innovative, exciting, and really help to fuel the growth of cooperative models in that way?
Well, one, I want to shout out Tamara, who you lifted into the space earlier, and her role with our loan fund is to be a loan steward. And what she and Susan Saycash of Cooperation New Orleans are responsible for are really supporting these ideas. People in community have some amazing ideas. Like, for instance, we are working with Keep It in the Culture, which is a Mardi Gras Indian co-op where they are providing access to the beads and the feathers and the resources that are needed for creating their regalia and being able to like source that stuff within the local community. And Tamara has been really in tune with supporting them, helping them to really spell it out what that business could look like, and help funders and lenders see that as an opportunity to infuse capital into the community. And I'll even speak to she's been working very closely with me and my family. We're creating what we call Urban Dream, which is a cooperative endeavor that includes all of my children and our various skills to provide event services. So I'm really, extremely thankful to like that type of work because she's more like a doula. She's in support of us and holding our hand through this process of birthing creative businesses. And I just want to just offer appreciations for folks who are really stewarding and fostering that work into community. And also just looking at new ways that you can create cooperative models. And it's not isolated to a restaurant or a grocery store. Cooperatives can look like any type of entity or any type of business.
I would like to shout out 3 different co-ops that I admire. One is the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, which changed and redefined what we often see as developers, right? I mean, myself working in the redevelopment space and, from the legal side and now the actual developer side, you often hear communities see developers as this external actor that is imposing something upon the community. And most of the time they are, because a lot of times they're companies that are mostly led by white male elites, and they come in, especially Black, brown communities, and they see this catastrophe of, you know, imposition and displacement. But what we saw with EB Prec, East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative, and then later the Guild in Atlanta, is a redefinition of, oh, we can actually be our own developers, right? We can redefine and put a new face on the term of development, so that we can be the change makers and the builders and the collaborators in our own neighborhoods, and we can supply and steward the land on our own. And so that was something that, you know, we didn't see in the co-op world. Again, going back to this box of like, this is a co-op, this isn't a co-op, but these folks really, you know, pushed the grain a bit and said, no, we're going to redefine, because we you know, why they, you know, what made it successful is that they focus on the issues. And then they say, how do we build a structure around that in order to solve those issues? So I want to shout out those two. And I believe, you know, the work we're doing with Connect Coding Cooperative is doing something similar, although it's not a redevelopment co-op. It's redefining the way business and entrepreneurship is sort of operated, particularly among Black women, who are the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs and yet are not supported in the realm of funding or business. And so how do we promote a system that is more responsive but also sustainable for that particular worker? And so it's really designed to promote that holistic approach to what is it that she needs, how do we also be responsive to our communities while also making sure that we're sustained and internally and not overworked or underpaid. And so I want to shout out those three, because these are co-ops that are pushing the box a bit, even within the cooperative world, with the people and the community in mind, and moving through those needs and those changing of those times and those needs there.
Yes, thank you for uplifting that disparate funding reality for Black women in the entrepreneurial space, despite being the best investment in closing the racial wealth gap, aren't trusted and often are unfunded, but continue to move the needle. And I was thinking about the legacy that Black women have had in cooperativism and how they have been that common thread over time. And so that really lifted me when you just shared that. I'm going to invite the audience to go ahead and submit questions if you have them. Okay, so we're waiting for questions. When we met before, something that we were talking about on that call was how celebratory cooperatives are. And I just really loved that when we were talking about the future of our economy and what we want to see and how we want to be a part of moving towards that, I was thinking about how irresistible Black joy and flourishing is. And I just really wanted to hear from either one of you the things that kind of keep you going in developing cooperative models, economic models in your own communities. And you can speak to celebrations in New Orleans, Tama, like we were talking about. So I'd love to hear more about the celebratory nature of doing and fostering and building community with people that you love.
Oh, this is really exciting, and I'm glad that you lifted this back out, because this really speaks to the work that we're doing with the Cooperation Gumbo Project. What we found over the years of how people have like done cooperative practices, that we figure out how to cooperate through the art of celebration, through the art of whatever it is, marketplaces, festivals. There is a unique energy that is generated when we come together, whether it's through food, whether it's through music. And I will say creating music is one of the most cooperative endeavors you can think about, because it speaks to how musicians have to get together and create harmony. And this is something that we just don't experience in like the ideas that are fostered through individualism, right? When we come together, harmony is the multitude of the voices that create a sound that feels good, that vibrates and resonates for you, and you just really are able to, experience that sound in a way that speaks to your heart and soul. And so that is in itself a whole level of like being in unity with each other and in cooperation. And so in New Orleans, the work around cooperating is like in our second line culture, is in our festival culture. And we create and curate opportunities for vendors to get together and be in a marketplace and do the work of creating a local economy, which most of the time economies and works are being extracted, and other people are in this space, taking away from that. Well, if we're creating our own events, we are now in a space where we are actually owning that work and keeping that revenue inside of our own communities. So I celebrate New Orleans for how they intentionally create the art of celebration as a part of a local economy.
That's a really good question. I think oftentimes, I know myself, I don't think about the celebrations. I think about the work and just, I mean, and I love the work, so it doesn't feel like labor, right? In that sense. But I remember when I first relocated to Chicago, I went to a celebration or it was a party for co-ops in the city of Chicago, and it was hosted by the Co-op Ed Center. And I remember just thinking, wow, they have a strong co-op ecosystem here. I was coming from New Jersey and Newark, and I was just excited to be part, excited to get involved, and and even they would say, really, we do, we have a lot. I'm like, yeah, you do. Like, I think sometimes when you're in the work, you don't realize that there is a community here. And then a couple of years later, you see the city of Chicago being part, because of really great people like Candace, et cetera, who really pushed the city government to say this is a business form that the city should support. And the city created this community wealth building initiative that really focused on co-ops. And it was also good to see people in the community ecosystem come together, right, even under that umbrella. And so, yes, celebrations are needed, because although we're looking towards the future, every day and every moment is a step towards the future. And so we should have celebrations and joy and peace, because at the end of the day, I think that's what we're aiming towards. And so I think it's important that we live every moment in that, and to just look at certain achievements as celebrations, right? Even the small ones, even the ones not so already wrapped tight, but that are there to really have a focus on co-op, especially within Black and Brown communities. If there's a highlight there, it definitely need to be celebrated. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. So we have some amazing questions in the chat. So I'm going to read out one question that we have. In that vein, oh wait, hold on, let me see. Okay, it's here on the screen. Okay, how can financial reparations and or policy-based reparations have positive and detrimental impacts on the cooperative paradigm? Should I repeat that? Let me know.
Joy, and I do want to, there's a question that came before this that I think this one dovetail off of.
Okay.
And it says, what is the role you see philanthropy and other forms of capital play in sustainability of cooperatives? And what ways have you seen philanthropy get involved, both in a good and bad ways? And I'll just say this, for philanthropists, they have a tendency for wanting things to look a certain way. Yet the art of Black cooperation has been studied for ages. As a matter of fact, it has been the influence of what we call and see as the European cooperative movement. And so I will say this, I think that what people in philanthropy should do is really break down the walls of the box that they put Black liberatory practices in, and find ways that we are being creative and we understand what we need in our own communities and are actually doing the things. So it doesn't look like you coming in and prescribing something different, but leaning into what is already there. And to the question of how have we seen that operate in both good ways and bad ways, having unrestricted grants that give people who are in stewardship um, this freedom to liberate the resources and give those to the people who they see that are meeting the needs of the community. It's a really simple formula. Community knows what community needs, and we just need access to liberated funds to do that. And I've seen some like grant makers do that work. And Common Future, I'm excited about how Common Future has leaned into understanding how we already know how to meet our needs. Just give the sister the bag and we'll figure it out.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, we're always saying those closest to the problems are the ones with the solutions, as you just affirmed. Um, Elizabeth, did you want to comment?
Nothing much to add except um, we need more support like Common Future, and I think that requires certain type of people within those institutions, because these are just institutions, right? And although older ones come with their own culture and foundation, it's going to be very hard to try to you as individuals change it. But I think as we build new institutions, alternatives, even in the philanthropy side, is how do we act in concert with one another. And to the respect of the traditional philanthropy, if they're true about their goals and mission of um, supporting these communities in an organic way, then they should listen to what Tamai said in terms of, we know what we want. All we need is the funding, right? I would say though, regardless, I think any solution will have to stem from the people, including sharing the resources across. So even if there's a season where philanthropy now wants to support co-ops, we always seen in history of philanthropy and city and et cetera, all these institutions, it's an ebb and flow. And so what we can't do is get dependent on that, because it will stop. And it may come back, but it's going to stop. And if it stops, what happens then, right? With, the nonprofit industrial complex, we learn about, the revolution not be funded. We learn about what happens when we're at their streams. And so I think there is a role, but for the recipient, I think there shouldn't be a dependency. There should always be, this is an additional resource. Just as if he was getting bank financing. I think banks, we can kind of see clearly, like, oh, they have an incentive for profit, but they all are kind of, philanthropy, all they have to do is commit 5%. The rest of it is going towards capitalism, right? And so, they're still arms of the same beast. So I think at the end of the day, it's about us not getting dependent on it, but also seeing it where it does align in those moments, and just, work in concert together and hope that we can push the needle a bit.
Yes, thank you both. We have another question. How do you think we can be intentional about the psychic healing through economic reparations? Who wants to go first?
I'll hop in quickly to say, you know, I think psychic healing is a word that speaks to me in a way, or a couple of words that speaks to me in our mindset about money. Um, and I think part of what we are faced with is a challenge around how we think about, because we're operating in a space of lack. How we make decisions about our household, we're budgeting out of lack. And I feel very connected to, if reparations was a real part or core of how giving and resources are distributed in community, then we should be budgeting. Let's just take that process, for instance, budgeting with the idea of making the thing happen, and not operating from a landscape of, we're doing this because we're restricting our activities because we don't have, right? So reparations should really be in support of changing the state of lack to a state of having. We tend to operate in a space of we don't have, or the not haves, and so we're trying to keep up. And so that healing looks like giving us stuff that we need, so that we're not doing the work around. Uh, I'm looking for a word, but it's not surfacing for me. but we're often like pinching pennies when we should be able to be creative and have liberation around creativity. There, you don't refine creativity, and I think the lack of being creative has actually allowed ourselves to continue to be in this mindset that we think of money as something that we have to chase when money is supposed to support our dreams. I hope that wasn't too choppy.
No, I love that, and I was thinking as you were speaking about it's true with the trauma, attached to money, but the investment should, invest with abundance, and I think that's I was thinking of abundance. I don't know if that was the word, but, Elizabeth,
Yes, that was the
is it?
word.
Okay, okay. Elizabeth, did you have, anything to add?
Well, shout out to Chipo. She's the co-founder of West Connect Holding Cooperative with this hard question. Um, from my understanding, the way I'm interpreting the question is that we often talk about reparations from an economic lens, and we don't align that with the psychic or the psychological or the emotional, mental, spiritual sort of well-being of ourselves. And I think, just going back to what in the co-op what we start off with is we're beyond profits, beyond business. So just always remembering that what we do has to respond to us, our social, mental, physical needs, and not just the economic, needs. Otherwise, we just have consumerism, and we just spending money for the sake of spending money. So I do think that, again, as Tamar mentioned as well, we have to remove that sort of trauma around money or disdain, because just like co-ops, it literally is a means, right? If we didn't have dollars, we'll have some type of goods to barter. I mean, we've always have something in the earth and the world to engage and exchange with. And so I like the idea of abundance as well, because we money, just like earth, trees, water, belongs to everyone, and it should be considered something that's shared and exchanged with one another. So I do feel like whatever reparations with economic lens, to remember that, and remember that whatever we get as reparations should have this collective cooperation sharing aspect to it, so that we promote that collective healing.
Yes. Thank you both. We have one more question I think we have time for. Okay, this is a good one. Are there parts of our economy or imagination where you don't see cooperatives but feel they should be there?
Yeah, philanthropy. Although philanthropy are like normally structured as nonprofits, and you can't have shareholders or members like co-ops, you can definitely have a holacracy model, or still this collective decision making model that includes the recipients as part of the decisions for grant making, et cetera. So that would be actually really dope to see that, a philanthropic organization that really want to test the waters, because again, these structures are all within the same system. We get it. There's limitations, but if you can take that structure and bend it a bit and say, well, let's bring the actual recipients, or those who will be impacted by our work, our funding, into the fold of decision making, that will be, I mean, not revolutionary, but it'll be different and new.
I love your answer, and I literally tapped into philanthropy the moment you said it. And I'll just go back to, economy means household management. And a lot of people don't identify that we run our households in a cooperative way. Whether you have partners, whether you have roommates, and sometimes people aren't as cooperative in their households, and could benefit from some of those practices, because they can create a better like quality of living. But I also think neighborhoods can benefit from more intentional cooperation. You see in a lot of streets, a lot of blocks that they look out for each other. But what would it look like to know that your neighbor is a mechanic and that person is the only person you go to? Or, of course, the person across the street from you provides a distinct service, and that is the only person. So, what would it look like if neighborhoods were more intentional around using cooperative economics as a strategy for building community and doing the work, and then households and teaching their children how to manage yourself, and then your resources, because to me it's beyond money. It's about resource management. So there are a few things that we can return to cooperativism. And I think these are things, there's a lot that we've already been doing, and we just haven't remembered that this is a practice that we already embody.
Oh, I love that. Yes, reclaiming memory and governing over our own bodies. So, the last thing I'm going to ask, how can we raise awareness and garner more support for the cooperative movement among policymakers and the general public?
Well, I will speak to this project that we have called Cooperation Gumbo, and it is an art intervention around cooperative practices. As we've been talking about here, there are so many ways that we experience cooperation in community, and there are so many historical contexts where we've seen over the civil rights movement, neighborhoods form. Even prior to that, we saw where there were intentional communities built to protect formerly enslaved people. Cooperation Gumbo really looks to truth tellers in our community, people who have had experiences around what it looks like to be in cooperation with each other, tell those stories and use that as a sounding board. And one of the mechanisms we've done as an arts intervention is do a micro broadcast as a way of like lifting those stories to our consciousness and our memories. And then from that, part of the work looks like using that context to develop either some policy language or white paper to tell the story of how cooperation exists within community. So I think art interventions, community dinners, a multitude of just conversations with your neighbors, because you start a conversation, you never know who was a part of a practice during the civil rights movement. You may have a former Black Panther in your neighborhood, and they can tell you the things that they did, or some other movement leaders, historical movement leaders, and bridging the gap over generation of how we've been in cooperation with each other.
I like that a lot. The answer to my, I often, because I'm behind the scenes, a computer and a lawyer and all that, that I don't get to have my boots on the ground as much as I would like. And to your point, it's simply just be the change you want to be, or emulate, the work that you're doing just in your own neighborhood, in your own community. I think that that's the best way, because also policymakers respond to people, or they should. Otherwise, we don't have democracy, right? But they respond to the people, and so then you get people that are mobilized enough to then want, put forth their own intentional direct actions if they want, right? But otherwise, really it's about just making sure the community, you engage the community and build community with your community. It's not always about the work technical piece, but actually just living and embodying it. I think that's the best way to spread awareness. And then, of course, you can always get together, write a white paper, and draft community benefits agreement, and make demands. But I think it starts with the mobilization first, because you can't have all those technical items without the people coming together.
Yes. Well, this was wonderful. Thank you both for joining me for Roots of Resilience. Tama from Cooperation New Orleans and Elizabeth, co-founder of WisConnect Holding Cooperative. This was a joy and a pleasure. Thank you both.
Thank you. This is great.
Thank you.